simple, but what it is, a planner could pick up the law as it exists and move forward with that effort. I don't think that it would be necessary for us to wait for greater clarity with regard to that aspect of it. I mean, we may reformat what we do in the end, but ultimately the reason why I'm saying, it's a prerequisite. It's a big task. And it's something that remains to be seen how it will be accomplished, what group. And it also refers to it being done by a community housing board. And obviously this is not the community housing board that was stipulated within the legislation. This is a community housing board as defined by Shelter Island. So, I mean, obviously what would have to happen first is that the town board would have to move forward and create that board, or make a decision whether this board in some way morphs into that. So, I mean, those are big picture considerations with regard to moving forward. And I just thought I would put them on the table.
So if I'm hearing correctly, the first action item then would be for the town to deem some body of people the community housing board for purposes of the legislation. And the second step would be to come up with the housing plan.
That is exactly correct. I mean, there's other things there we can talk about that are sort of missing, unique to Shelter Island, that would also have to be accomplished. And it's sort of the elephant in the room. And I would be happy to yield to Jerry to talk about the status of transfer of development rights. But the anticipation or the setup of this is that affordable housing would be sited in a more dense configuration than what is currently permitted by the Suffolk County Health Department. And the exception to that is if you get into the use of transfer of development rights. And I don't really know what our status is with regard to that, but it's sort of the key component of being able to move forward is understanding how Shelter Island sits with regard to that commodity, which is necessary in order to do this type of development and this type of housing.
Hey, Michael, that sounds great. But for those of us who haven't been on this committee before, maybe I feel like it's cart before the horse, since we're talking about some really specific things in this legislation without getting an overview of what the committee is doing and what our function is and how each of us can contribute. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could maybe organize it so that those of us who haven't been here before can understand how we proceed.
I guess I have a couple things to say. So, right. So what Michael is talking about is specifically relating to use of water.
Right.
I would say, right. So basically, I don't know if procedurally, if it's okay to switch the order of the agenda or not. Can someone tell me if that's allowed? Yes, I'm getting an okay.
You can do whatever you want, Chris.
So I think, Jerry, maybe then what would make the most sense, Jerry, is if you gave us a sort of rundown on what's going on the Man Road project and 12th South Ferry Road. But I just want to say a couple things before you start.
Sure.
So basically, Maria and Bran and Paul, we have been working on 2 different projects specifically relating to housing. We haven't had a meeting in months, and it was basically our main focus up until the new focus was getting a board back together.
Okay.
And I think Jerry can give a description of what's going on with those two projects. And that would be a good way to kind of let you know where we're at as far as what we have actually been doing. And then I'll just add to that that the other thing I feel like is we've also been talking about what the role of the community housing board should actually be.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add to that, Peter, before Jerry gives?
That's perfect.
Yeah. So Jerry, you want to let us know what's going
Okay,
on?
yeah. So, and again, with just to reiterate, before the night's over, we're gonna have to just decide and maybe make a recommendation to the town board. I mean, my feeling is we should, I don't want to say disband this group, but turn this group into the governor's, mandated group, which is a minimum of 7 members up to 15 members. And there are some criteria. I mean, we all fit in it, but we also need some other, individuals in it.
Bankers.
So that's a discussion we'll need to have. As far as the two projects, I'm going to let Michael speak the technical parts of it, where we are. Michael and I have been working pretty much in conjunction on this. The two projects we're looking at, Manwaring Road, the town owns 1 acre, and the old highway bond on 114 adjacent to the Historical Society, we own a little over 4 acres. We've done the first phase study of the old highway bond. Now we're in the second phase, looking, the first phase is kind of a scam. The first phase tells you have to do the second phase, but you have to pay for the first phase. So now they're gonna test the soil, test the water, make sure everything's good.
So these
Again,
are state mandates, like you have to go through certain
this
phases.
is all secret, environmental issues.
Got
And
it.
again, it goes back to the fact that it was, a lima bean factory. It was a highway bond for years. There's storage there. So, it's one of those, be careful what you ask for, because we might not like what we find, but we have to know.
Well, in that regard, it's fortunate that the law does mention brownfield sites.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Hopefully we're actually not dealing with a brownfield site, and we're at this point, just basing the need to do an environmental assessment of that property on the history of what kinds of activities occurred there. But there's really no indication until we get a further report that there is environmental pollutants there. It's just based on things that occurred there.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, there is funding available. It just could, set the time frame back further than we hope.
So
so real quick, I'm just going to give you the overview, and then Mike, you have the ability to share your screen?
I do.
Okay, so on the Manwaring one, we're looking at home ownership. We're looking at 4, and then we kind of decide possibly 5, depending on where we go with the Board of Health and the transfer of development rights plan for public water. And the way we're looking at that is the town would always own the land. We would sell the houses. We put in different kind of criteria than was done on the original Bowditch Road project, because I'm a very big fan of the Bowditch Road project. The first house sold 25 years after the fact, but it's not affordable anymore. It sold for $850,000. So, Michael, and we've been looking into it, and there are ways, East Hampton has in their plan that you can't do any significant improvements to the house. You can paint it, you can do little things, but you can't do any major improvements. And you can, number one, because the town owns the land, the equity isn't as much as it would be if you owned it all and sold it. But number two, there'd be a formula of how much equity you can get out of the house. So it would always stay in the affordable range. I mean, you want people to get equity. That's part of the, the American dream, is you want to be able to move up, but you don't want to retire on the sale of the house. So that's number one. So we're looking at that. And as we get into that, we'll have to discuss, this group will have to come up with criteria, who's available, how we're going to do it. I have some, ideas on that. When we're ready for that, we'll toss it around. Then the other parcel we're looking at is all rentals over at the highway barn. And Michael's done some sketches for that. It could be anywhere from, Michael, 20 units up, or, depending on, again, on We have the building envelope. Matt Sherman has done it where we can get a well in with everybody else's wells there. We can fit an IA system in, but it's just a matter of, design and what we're gonna do. So Mike, I don't know if you want to show some of your.
Yeah,
sketches.
I probably want to do two things.
Sure.
I'll share my screen and I'll maybe elaborate a little bit on
Yeah,
some of the
please.
subjects.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
And Jerry, you guys said it's 4 or 5 single family homes is what you're talking about, right? For
Yes.
the man-wearing?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
It's on 1 acre. And basically what Michael referenced earlier, Maria, was the transfer of development rights. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with that process. In
Tell me.
2006, the county instituted a transfer of development rights program. So whenever any of the towns bought land with the 2% money, they can put into it, into the agreement that they can transfer the development rights from the preserved land and keep it in a bank so we can put in, increased density somewhere else specifically for housing.
Got it.
For whatever reason, the town of Shelter Island chose not to get into that program.
Huh.
So for all the purchases we made, we don't have any development rights. Fred Thiel is working on, and he believes the governor's going to sign something where we can get the development rights retroactively to all the lands we've bought.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we're hoping to go forward with that. But in the meantime, we've written legislation. We had the Amber, we had the first hearing. We set the hearing or we had the hearing? I get confused. For the transfer of development rights program. So going forward with any.
We haven't set the hearing yet.
Okay. So going forward, we will have the transfer of development rights program in place.
I don't know how much you want me to intervene or speak, or because a lot of this stuff we've done and I have done and I do have experience in helping, or at least defining. First of all, with regards to the home ownership, I would love to go over various programs that were done with land leases, which are home ownership, that the individuals own the building, but the town owns the land. We also do what's called a buyer benefit program, where it's a straight sale, but we put covenant restrictions on the property, so much so that it literally, if anyone tries to even register or try to file for a building permit, immediately the property is marked or is highlighted, and all of those covenant restrictions come to light. It also puts in there some of the resale value or resale instructions on how it stays in affordability for in perpetuity. Secondly, with regards to TDRs, there are alternatives where you can utilize pine bearing credits. And I know that the county has a number, not a great deal of, but a number of pine bearing credits that can be transferred from. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same watershed as school district, but it could be Southold, it could be East Hampton. They could be transferred over. And that's another process when sitting with the board of review or the health department board of review. They could probably help to determine how much consumption or how much daily consumption is required to be restricted from one property brought over to Shelter Island. So there are ways to get to where you need to get there.
Quick question, Curtis. When you say we, you said we have, were you working with another organization or with the town or something on affordable housing before? Are you a developer or?
The answer to that is yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I personally have done it before through with the Housing Authority. We worked on a number of proposals and projects. One of Sandy Hollow, Spionk, our Hampton Bays Apartments, homes. We're actually in the process now of getting Pine Barren credits for a parcel in Southampton Village that will be, it's a 2-family home with accessory apartment above garage. And we have a 6-lot subdivision we're working on now. Each lot will have a single family home with accessory apartment above garage. Accessory apartments, one of those other added features we're trying to do to increase the housing inventory. It gives you the home ownership and the 1 unit or 2 unit accessory. Exactly. Yeah. So
how available are those credits in terms of cost and quantity?
Well, if it's for affordable housing and it's done through the county, there is a county program with an allotment of number of units. It's not a lot, and they are. I mean, I'm asking for a few. It is a lengthier process sometimes, but they're not a lot. There are in the open market individuals who have pine barren credits in the open market, and they can go from anywhere between 80,000 to 100 to 150,000, depending on the parcel which was sterilized.
Because what exactly is a credit? And the reason I ask is in one of our meetings with the county, it was just kind of mentioned off the cuff that we have 8 credits from lands that we bought with the county, that the county had the development rights. So we have 8 credits, but I didn't really know what that meant.
An engineer would have to really give you the definition of how those credits are determined. But normally, typically, each parcel has a certain amount of density. Well, when people say density and use density as a reference to talk about affordable housing, density was always a term meant for septic. Septic is a septic term. How much a particular or specific property in terms of its daily consumption can maintain. So based on lot sizes and location, each parcel is given a certain amount of I want to say density, but it's not the right term. It's more of an engineer's term. I don't have the proficiency in it. I hire someone to do it for us. But what I will say is that once they make that calculation, they take a lot of factors into play. I can show you kind of the most recent calculation for transfer development rights that I just most recently had. It kind of gives you an idea of how they make their calculation. It's above my pay grade. I know how to build. Okay. I don't know all that stuff.
I think maybe we're putting the cart before the horse, but this is
yes.
Good information. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Mike, you want to start the?
I do. Let me just say that this first image is, for me, is more than just a cover image. What these photographs reflect is sort of the historic, what I interpret to be the historic precedent of affordable housing on the island. These are the simple farmhouses of the island. And in some of the work that I did, which actually got into what these buildings look like, I took this under consideration. And remarkably, it's not only a pleasant and desirable aesthetic, but it also translates into simple and affordable building techniques that can be done on island with local craftsmen and with simple lumber and things of that sort. So I always sort of refer back to what was done in the past as sort of a guidance. Moving forward on this, what I'd like to also see if I can get this to move. The one thing I wanted to put out there as an architect sort of responsible for the work that you're about to see is that it sort of predated this act.
Oh yeah, it's all in there. But
in a way, well, first of all, let me basically repeat some of the things on here. It must be an implementation plan. It must adhere to smart growth initiatives. And those smart growth initiatives include and are referenced in the act of minimizing social, economic, and environmental impact, encourage development in areas where infrastructure is available and practical. And that's a tough one on Shelter Island. I'm not quite sure how that, we can accommodate that because we build infrastructure in most instances, with the exception of the heights. We build sewer systems and wells for every house that we build. Conserve and protect natural and historic resources, coordinate development with neighboring communities. It means we're not supposed to put this in the middle of something like Sachem Woods and hide it and have it be disconnected from the community, but it is really meant to be part of the fabric of the community. And that's, I guess, more clearly stated with regard to the next bullet, which says utilize community design principles to strengthen communities, integration of income and age groups, mixed land use, and compact development. Another one that's a little challenging for the island is provide transportation alternatives to reduce automobile dependency. In a situation where you had a transportation infrastructure, it would encourage you to build, near that transportation so that it wasn't a car dependent situation. And I don't know quite how Shelter Island fits into that category. Consistency to ensure predictability in building and land use. It does encourage you to come up with prototypes. That's how I interpret this, and to follow consistent principles of development. I think sort of most importantly, plans shall be developed through a collaborative community-based effort, and the town housing plan shall be an element of the comprehensive plan. Now, I extracted all this out of the act because I needed to put it in a form where I could understand it and use it moving forward. There's only a couple of these, but one of the things that I always think is important on Shelter Island is communications, because before anything gets started, there's a whole set of perceptions, some of which are true and most of which are inaccurate. And one of the things that we should consider moving forward is a fairly sophisticated communications effort so that we can get ahead of misunderstandings about this. I think if we adopt that principle, we'll have far less difficulties making this a reality. And this is thinking all the way forward to the referendum. But I think you have to understand the big picture and then start on those items which are on the critical path. I might say communications is on the critical path and something that should be formulated early on in the process. One of the things that has been the case on Shelter Island is we have very few people that are on our registry, as I understand it, of needing these houses. And I think that has to do with people not perceiving that this is going to happen. The eligibility requirements are fairly spelled out by reference to something called the low interest rate mortgage program as to what income levels these houses can be built for or rented for and cannot be exceeded. Obviously, moving forward, there's people that have said in the past that if we build higher density housing, that it's going to have an adverse environmental impact. People are perceiving that we're going to use town tax resources to do this. These are all communications issues that need to be addressed. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to put that out there. One of the things that we're going to have to address, unless we get some relief, as Jerry was referring to, or unless we can get the Pinelands area to be our sending district, we need to tackle this TDR problem. And when I say that, it's the basic commodity that allows for density. Otherwise, as of right, we're dealing with really just 2 dwelling units per acre. And with the cost of land on Shelter Island, that doesn't yield affordable housing. My understanding there's a Suffolk County Memorandum 27 that deals with when variances are given to increase density, that one of the criteria is a public water district. There are public water districts on the island. An example of that would be West Neck Water District and the Deering Harbor Water District. So I think somehow we have to extract a smaller scale version of that, and in order to facilitate the density transfer and variance that is required. There is reference within the code that we can meet with the Office of Wastewater Management and get a lot of these, and I don't know to what degree. I know a lot of different initiatives are happening. A lot of people are doing different things, but I think that's probably another issue. We probably need to get all of our efforts coordinated so that this is I would say that this is an interdisciplinary exercise. It needs legal, it needs engineering, it needs architecture, it needs planning, it needs communications, but all those things must be woven together and should not and cannot for success be separated out as individual efforts. So getting into the Manwaring site, personally being a proponent of smart growth, and knowing that this was community housing, the fact that the design sort of predated the code, I was still thinking along the lines of smart growth and how this fits into the community. The Manwaring site in that regard is a 10-minute walk to IGA and to shopping. It's a reasonable walk to the school, a little bit longer, but it's a manageable walk to the school. It's visible to the community. In terms of integration into the fabric of the community, it's near other workforce housing. This particular site has no known environmental issues because it was never used for anything other than agricultural or was natural land. Again, it requires the acquisition of additional development rights from open space to achieve a reasonable project density. And I won't speculate on exactly how many transfer TDRs that we need. In terms of where the site is, obviously this is the windmill before it got its renovation. It's right across the street from Sylvester Manor Farm. So it's really a nice site to start with. Jerry, I have to kind of apologize. There were so many different variations of this, that this particular one references duplex units. Obviously, what I would anticipate is that there would be 4 buildings on the site and that they would be single family units. And to my way of thinking, as I do the transfer of development right formula, I think this is a 1.3 acre site. It's not unreasonable for us to be projecting or asking for 4 dwelling units per acre. In terms of following the ideas of smart growth, it attempts to build a community by having shared amenities in terms of a common green and a community garden and some shared resources. So it's a kind of cluster configuration with a shared open space. There is a request that we would connect it back to the old, help me out here, Jerry. The site behind us is an open space site. It's the nursery site, yes.
Oh,
That's the basic story here. So I don't know if there's a lot more to be said here, but interestingly enough, if the town were to donate this piece, the preliminary numbers that I have run, and they're kind of loose with regard to hard cost were pretty well accurately projected. Soft cost, all the extra things that go into building costs, like legal fees and permitting and planning and all those things. It is an affordable project without an infusion of county money. I mean, the county ask here is for the density. And the reason why it's affordable is the town owns the land.
Mhm.
And the houses are small. They're around 1,000. They're 2 bedrooms and around 1,000 square feet.
Mhm.
So between not having the astronomical land prices that we have here and not trying to build big mansions, it's doable, and it meets the criteria. And we use the term affordable housing, but it's really sort of what to put another title on it. It's workforce housing. What workforce housing means is something close to the median income of the county,
Mhm.
which is around $100,000.
Mhm.
So using that income and going through all the mortgage calculations, this is sort of a standalone project potentially without subsidies, which I think is interesting to note.
Definitely. That's really great.
And another component of that is obviously when you sell a house versus renting a house, you're shifting the maintenance component of that.
Uh-huh.
You don't, all the maintenance things in terms of deferred maintenance and what you would do in terms of good practice in a rental situation where you're planning 20 years from now to replace the roof and siding and windows, all that burden travels with the homeowner, and that makes it simple and more affordable in terms of the initial pricing. So the other site is I refer to it here for some reason as the South Ferry Road site, but is the Highway Barn site. I think it's a prominent site because it's adjacent to our historic society. It is literally a 10-minute walk to our schools. It again requires a density variance. It has a wetlands pond on the site, which in practice from the county potentially would be once we map that wetlands formally and understand its buffers, that may or may not count in the land that we can use for density.
Mhm.
You just may have some issues with if you decide to, or you have no choice, but the IA system, there's certain specific setbacks that you must have from wetlands.
Yes, but what I was specifically referring to is we don't always count wetlands in as of right density.
Mm.
We sort of subtract that out and say that's not usable land. So that could further impact what our assumptions here are.
We actually had that all surveyed and everything. There's
Yeah.
still plenty of room with the 100 feet.
Yeah,
I agree, and this scheme shows a configuration which is based upon my understanding of what the increased density would be, and that is 4 units per acre. And this particular site, the acreage is 4.1 without an adjustment for the wetlands, and therefore it's showing 16 dwelling units. These are 4-unit apartments, which is kind of a nice, I'll say, niche within the code. They share a common stairwell, and they're pretty simple in terms of firewalls and other things that add to higher density housing. It's a pretty straightforward situation in terms of construction. It's still wood frame. It follows the same sort of theme that I showed on the other one, where there's potentially a community garden and a community green, potentially a playground or sort of shared outside space. The wetlands is left untouched. The road swings in that position now, so I took the liberty of assuming that I could get that close to the wetlands because the road was already there. It's also important to note that there's been not a lot of debate, but what are we going to do with regard to parking for the Historic Society? What are we going to do with regard to parking for the farmers market? that is not impacted by this project in any way.
Right.
So I think in that regard, it's important to get out information. There's some concern, I think, about where all the stuff that's currently here from the highway department. It's got impounded vehicles, it's got mulch, and it's got precast concrete drainage basins. I suspect in all of Shelter Island, we can find another location for those things, and that this is an achievable site. And if it's depending on the outcome of the phase 2 environmental investigations, there may be some environmental remediation on the site, or we could find that the site is clean, but that remains an open question. So again, with regard to quantity of units, I see this as 16 units, 4 dwelling units per acre. I see greater density occurring. And there was a discussion at the town meeting of what is a receiving and what is a sending area. Perfect example is the Pinelands. But basically a receiving and a sending area in terms of transfer of development rights, the simplest way to understand it is that a sending area is an area that you want to preserve. It's an area where you want to preserve open land and you want to lower the density. A receiving area is an area where you want to increase density. And there's potentially 2 levels of density increase that may be pertinent to Shelter Island. One is somewhere around this 4 dwelling units per acre, not simply, but for the important mission of affordable housing. There are other locations in other communities, and possibly Shelter Island, where the receiving district is a town center, and where you would want to increase the density because it's just a better practice that in a town center that you would have more people living there, maybe a couple more shops, and it would be a walkable environment, and you wouldn't spread housing throughout the entire island or the entire county evenly, that you would begin to place housing near transportation centers or near hubs of activity. And that, I suspect, in that case, the receiving district, if we were to have one, an argument could be made for a good argument using smart growth initiatives for increase over the 4 dwelling units per acre. But I don't suspect any of the 2 sites that we're looking at fall into that category. Hypothetically, if we were to build some housing in the center to support the vitality of the center, an argument could be made for a greater, more TDRs transferred and a greater density. I hope I haven't lost people along the way.
No. I think this is great. It just, hi, this is Maria. I just wanted to say, I think it's so great. It's great to visualize it. And I'm so happy. I guess my question is regarding the issue around density. For instance, there is that little strip. I think these should be how they are. I think they're great. It says the layperson who knows nothing, but I'm really happy, and I would be so happy if this was affordable housing in our town. But thinking of the issue around what you called a receiving area and a sending area, is that correct?
Correct.
So that area, that like kind of dead zone between the library and the post office, where there's the liquor store, then the closed store, and then kind of like a just dead like parking lot kind of thing. It seems to me, and I know it's privately held, but it seems to me that in my imagination, at least, that would be the kind of area where you could have like how it is in Sag Harbor, where you have lovely buildings, you have shops, and then you have apartments above that. Like that's what you're talking about when you're talking about that kind of density in a receiving area, right?
That is absolutely correct. And I'm cautious when I talk about that because I understand that people view density
I know
in different ways. But
Right.
it's important for people to, I think, understand the concept of a sending district and a receiving district,
Mhm,
with the container being Shelter Island. And
mhm.
once you do that, you understand that you're not increasing the density
Right,
of the island. What
right,
you're doing is you're redeploying the density that is already here
right.
along the principles of best planning, best practices, smart growth. So
Yeah.
it's no more than you would have. It's just a better deployment of functions. That's one way to look at it.
I
But-
do have a question though regarding how the kind of the technical aspects of management regarding a rental units, and that is who is considered the landlord and who takes care of the maintenance and management of the rental units?
I'm going to say yes. Those those are the issues. I mean,
TBD.
we could do a variety of things. I mean,
Uh-huh.
on the island,
Uh-huh.
we could partner with a developer,
Right.
and the developer presumably would have experience in that area.
Right.
I suspect that we're going to struggle with that because we're
Yeah.
remote and our projects are smaller in scale.
Right. Right.
So
Curtis, do you have anything on that?
I was, was waiting for the conversation, and it actually led right to one of my main questions: A, funding, B, management, and C, developer. And I'll start with C and work backwards. Any developer coming in here will see 4 acres and immediately lose their mind and ask, why are we only doing 4 units per acre? And so first, I want to congratulate you on your restraint, because most people see 4 acres and immediately they want to overbuild or overdevelop, or for example, our here in Southampton, we look at 12 units per acre as being the norm, and some people say that's not. They say that's not enough.
Wow.
So just to give you an idea, for the last 13 years, I've given the position up, but I was the Architectural Board of Review and Historic Preservation Chair for 13 years in Southampton Village. I see growth. I've seen growth over 13 years, where you're literally putting as much as you can on the smallest piece of lot. So restraint is a great job. I think it's an easier sell for your community, and I think it's better. I think it's better fit for your community to have this type of growth rather than over density. So I challenge you not to get suckered into or forced into overbuilding or overdeveloping these lots. But the problem next comes: how do you fund it in a manner that it self-sustains itself?
Right.
We are always looking at from a developer standpoint, it's got to be able to maintain itself while still keeping low rents. And those are normal, typical programs that are income-based, and those income-based are wrapped around Suffolk County numbers, the area median income. So what usually and genuinely happens is rents end up getting higher because now when you develop backwards, when you develop number of units and then try to back in a dollar amount, because you have your costs, your carrying costs, servicing costs, then you have the individuals who are going to be maintaining it, and at some point someone's going to probably have to be paid to manage it. All of those costs, now you have to determine what is your rent limit going to be so that it sustains itself and it still remains affordable. And so when you find yourself where you wanted the numbers to be extremely reasonable, you are forced to increase them to a degree where it no longer becomes affordable. So I'm happy that at least the mindset is to keep it restrained and ensuring that the development isn't overbuilt and is a more comfortable conversation with the community. But at the same instance, all of those questions you had about management, overseeing, sustaining itself, who's going to be your core or your applicant, is it the workforce? I call everything attainable housing, because at the end of the day, it needs to be obtainable in order for you to live there. So there's a lot of steps to this. This is a great start, but I really would like to, if I could help in any way, work with you on creating at least an operating budget or a pro forma in a manner so that we know, these are your income limits, your income levels. This is what a typical and average cost of construction is going to be. These are your carrying costs throughout the entire in an annual basis. Let's figure out how it can become sustainable. And then we determine the number of units that will work in that. And that makes sense.
Yeah. Chris and Peter, I would think all these things we're discussing are going to have to go into our housing plan. I mean, that we have to put, for the state, how are we going to move forward? Who's going to manage these things? Everything Curtis just explained, I think it's going to have to be part of the plan that we put together, so we can get the funding, so we can use the funding from the 2%.
Right.
And then there's no determination on whether that 2% would go, for example, in terms of the CPF and the disbursement of CPF. I don't know what your allotment is in comparison to a Southampton and East Hampton, who gets and receive or who contributes a great deal to that fund.
Right.
So is that percentage, is your percentage going to be enough it's that hasn't been determined either.
Right.
Or if it's been approved. So what will be the funding source if all of these things actually fall under?
Right, that 0.5%, if it goes on the ballot in 2022, that's the end of that year, then theoretically it starts January 1st of 2023. Who knows
Correct.
what the real estate market is going to look
Right.
like. So I think that money for right now is, don't even think about it.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can't wait on that for something like this. We're such a small town. It's going to take us a real long time for that to build up in a really significant way, Curtis.
10 to 15
Yes.
years.
Yes.
Is funding a problem for the two projects that have been outlined on this call?
Depends.
Or are
We
these
really
sort of
haven't gotten that far into it, whether we're gonna, like Curtis said, we're gonna put it out for a request for proposal, for someone to, build it and manage it, or we haven't really gotten that far. These are really just, Michael's done a tremendous amount of work, but it really is just brainstorming at this point. There's nothing concrete. It's just trying to get some ideas that we can, give the county some idea of what we want to do, and get ready to show the public this is what we're looking to do. But nothing's written in stone, and we haven't gotten that involved with how it's going to be done, quite honestly. I mean, it won't be done with taxpayer money.
Well, but also, oh, sorry, somebody else was speaking.
That's okay, go Maria.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing that it does intrigue me about the bill that was passed, but also our earlier conversation, is the idea of a public-private partnerships. And
Yes.
that is how best to somehow entice, use, cajole, inspire some private financing for this kind of development. And I don't know if that means private could come from a foundation, or if private comes from a corporation, or I'm not exactly sure how private might actually work. But it seems to me that especially for expediency, meaning that we're not waiting 10 years for something like this to happen, that the earlier we start creating partnerships with organizations or individuals who might be interested in this kind of thing, I think the better the chances are of success.
Maria, we have some, as you're probably well aware, we have some very generous people on Shelter Island.
Yeah.
And I've been, in touch with quite a few of them, and mostly to pick their brains. I haven't asked them for money.
Right.
But they know the intent is that we're going to try to form some kind of community trust.
Good.
And put a group together and, do exactly what you're saying with the public-private. And so that is, I'm not going to say it's in the works, but
It's in the
process.
conversation.
Exactly.
It's
and
in the
discussions have been started, and
yeah.
there is some support to do it.
I would say for myself, listening to all of this, what Curtis, what Paul just said and what Curtis also said, I think that we should move forward using this as a template and then go ahead and do everything that Curtis just said, which is price out the development, how much it would cost, what some management possibilities are, you know, kind of some long range understandings of how the market might work, like pull together, even if they're just kind of rough estimates, have that as a beginning package to move forward in presenting to people. I think one of the things that's, Michael, I don't know if it was on your document about generating public interest and support for a referendum. Was that correct? Was that on one of your?
Yes, it was.
So I feel like anything that we can have that's along the lines of, you know, hey, here's some ideas of how we could do this. Here's some rough estimates of what this kind of thing could cost. Here's a list of how other towns have done private public partnerships. Like to have like kind of a little folder, a little like file book thing that's like, hey, this is how it could work. I think would help direct the conversation for people. I love the idea of talking about what you said was attainable housing, Curtis. That's such a, and workforce housing, like those two things, moving away from the idea of affordable, which somehow like just turns into monster thoughts that I've never understood, like weird, screwy things that people think about when they think about affordable housing. So yeah, I think that's, I don't even know what I'm saying because I've never been on this committee before, but anyway, that's, there's my 5 cents.
Well, even just as a follow-up to that, so Curtis, do you have like any kind of dummy model or any kind of model that you put together that shows the various inputs, maybe some kind of Excel spreadsheet or something, so that some of us could get more familiar with the different inputs and outputs?
That's a cool.
I have a pro forma for 28 units that I can get to you so that at least you can get an idea. Now remember, cost of construction has increased 30-40% since
Right.
the last time we've done. So the numbers will definitely be different than
Would you
current market.
estimate like 250 to 350 on the cost of construction, maybe 350 at this point in time?
You more like 4.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So just an input, and then the model kicks out what the expected expenses are.
And that's without now the requirement of the IA system, which Southampton uses or has created in its legislation the ability to use CPF because it becomes a water quality concern. So CPF is for affordable housing can fund the IA system. I don't know if that's something that Shelter Island can, from an administrative standpoint or municipal standpoint, look to create the same legislation.
What's IA?
That's the new septic system.
Oh, that, okay, got it.
Which is a requirement. Yeah.
What, hon?
It's a requirement for any new construction.
Got it, okay. Well, when I looked over that, they have the low income mortgage rates and they tell you what the income levels are, and then the cost of housing, like, and how far up they will go. I was shocked at how high the level was. Like some of the houses for Suffolk County, like the top income level was 145,000, but they were also quite candid in assessing how much houses cost, because some of the houses, they said that the limit that they could finance was up to $897,000. So that's that's pretty much how much it costs. So it's not like they're saying, oh, we can only afford to subsidize or be involved in homes that cost $300,000, because everybody knows those don't exist really. I mean, they did for like Buffalo or something, but for Suffolk County, they seem pretty honest in the in that form or whatever, whatever.
Well, in 2022, conventional mortgage will go up to 625,000. So in that instance, you recognize that even the market recognizes home sales have increased dramatically, and has far outpaced even income. So there are a lot of individuals that are just not in a position to own right now. And that's why a lot of rentals are becoming more, you see a lot of more complexes and developments building more rentals because the need is now And I don't. There's other ways to do this, and I would double check to see all the various parcels that Shelter Island has that's owned by the town, and maybe you can do scattered sites where you, instead of one parcel, you have multiple parcels, each parcel being one project, and now you've increased your total number of units. Rather it being 14 units, it goes up to say 50 units, but it's on 7 sites. Now those are scattered sites. It's one project sponsored by Shelter Island. The state could fund something like that, or a county could fund something like that. There are ways.
Curtis, just so you
It's interesting
understand,
that you say that, because from a standpoint of developer interests, if we were to obviously to join the scattered sites and put that out for the interest of a single developer, I think that becomes more marketable than taking every one of these sites that we find and treating them as an individual site, because there's obviously an economy of scale in terms of management and maintenance issues.
But it's also a competitive. It's also a competitive funding market where you have to get New York State to look at your project, and they want to get the best dollar for their dollar. The governor's not coming out to Shelter Island for 20 units, but she will come out, or her office will come out for 60 units.
Curtis, just so you understand, these are the 2 parcels the town owns, period, that we can build on. And my feeling was these 2 projects I feel are very doable. And if we can do them and show the public that we can do them, then we can go after these donors that I was talking about to start a land bank and to get money to do just what you're saying.
I don't want to raid the coffers in terms of town land, but I know we have sites that are reserved for particular purposes, and for watersheds as one example. And what I'm speculating is, if we were to do an analysis of what quantity of land do we need to support that watershed, and does that generate, we've got Sachem Woods was earmarked for a watershed, if I understand correctly. Right. If we do that analysis and say it's 26 acres, does 24 acres or 20 acres constitute our watershed need? Jerry, you have to answer this question. I don't know whether it was ever drilled down in that much detail as to the utilization of all the land that the town owns. I mean, I think
anything we bought with 2% money is preserved. We can't touch it.
You cannot touch it.
Sachem's Woods, just as you mentioned, Michael, is for water preservation. If and when we need to go with public water, that's probably where the well fields would be. As you know, and I'll tell this group, and I'll tell the paper because they're here too. We are in discussions to buy the acre on 114 between Bobby Marcello's land and Bobby Teodoro's land. That's adjacent to Sachem's Woods. It's 1 acre parcel. The Nature Conservancy owns it. It was offered to the 2% committee. And when the 2% committee asked me, I said, well, it's really, number one, it's commercial property. And number two, it's more important for housing than it is for preservation to preserve an acre adjacent to 20 odd acres. So I asked them to talk to the Nature Conservancy and see if they would be willing to, sell it for housing. And we met and we did an appraisal on the land. And they said, as long as we would provide a greenway to get to the back, we could do something. So Michael, that's another acre, but we're really land poor is what I'm saying. We don't have land to build on. We have those 2 parcels and possibly this one coming up.
So Jerry, given that we have the 2 parcels, what's, I always subscribe to the idea that perfect is the enemy of done. So what does it take to get started on one of them?
The first thing, Paul, would be we've initiated discussions with the county, and now if we go back to the first one, the man-wearing parcel, that's adjacent to, I think, I'm not sure, I think it's 19 acres that we own adjacent to it that's preserved. So my initial discussion with the county was we'd like to put the well and the septic on the 19 acres. And we might not have to now, you know, with the IA system, we put it in the green, in the community green spot and put a well, you know, a community well. So the first part is for us to come up with a plan that we want to propose to the county. Then we'll go to the county and get, you know, the okay that, yeah, this will work, we can go forward with it. And when I say go to the county, with Amber and I, we met actually with it in Yaphank today, meeting with the wastewater group. But we're gonna try to meet with the county executive and the deputy county executive rather than, you know, just go through the channels. Because this, you know, we feel is we're at a crisis state right now, and you know we need to address this.
Yeah.
Well, the home ownership lots could easily be done just using traditional financing, and then when the individuals purchase the homes to pay back whatever loan or traditional loan that you take out.
Well, the way there's the one project we did was 25 years ago on Bowditch Road. It was 6 houses, and the way the town did it was they took out a builder's loan, and then as each person bought, you know, they took out a mortgage and they paid it back.
Correct. Correct.
And again, those are all things, you know, we'll be picking your brain. You know, well, Helen's legal expertise, Paul will be, you know, picking your brain. And again, I think that'll go into, you know, how we're going to do our housing plan, and you know, what are our options and how do we go forward. I don't want to get too bogged down in you know the specifics right now. I think the most important thing right now is that we decide how we're going to go forward with establishing the criteria we need for this legislation. We need to put together the board, a minimum of 7 people, a maximum of 15, and we need to start how we're going to do the plan. Do we start the plan on our own? Do we wait till we after we get the town board member after the election? We're going to start the comprehensive plan again. Do we wait for that to go, or do we start it? So I think it's very important that we get going on the how we're going to go forward with this legislation.
A lot of municipalities do an RFP for an agency specific to do your housing plan that you're referring to. They do that for 2 reasons. One, most of the individuals that are probably within your town or within your municipality are emotionally vested one way or another. So having an independent study come in and do a needs analysis. What is the need for affordable housing? Then they typically do what is it, home ownership? Is it rental? Is there an income limit? They literally go down and give you demographic on you know who will be your target, and then you from that plan now you have a workable map to develop from. So
here's my question, which is always my question: how much would something like that cost?
I can get you numbers on what we paid.
Just give me an idea, because I have no idea.
25-30 grand.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Didn't we have that, Jerry, when we had those people come and do the comprehensive plan?
Well, it's not as comprehensive as Curtis is talking about. It's more of a, you know,
overall thing.
Well, it's more of a, you know, this is what I think. This is what, you know.
This is Curtis, what you're referring to was a demand study specifically?
Well, no, there's in the housing plan, there's a needs analysis.
Yes.
So you do a needs analysis within the plan itself, and that'd be a section of the housing plan.
And you're suggesting that we outsource that to people that do that kind of.
It's never challengeable when you have a third party looking at it. It's never challengeable, especially if you're at some point we'll be looking for state, federal funding for any of your projects moving forward.
Okay, so I guess my question to Chris and Peter is, how do we go forward? What's the next step?
Well, I think you should get maybe the guidelines from the state of how this board is actually to be run and governed. And then when you get all that, then we should discuss a chair and move from there.
Okay, I think, I'm pretty sure I sent the legislation, if you download the legislation, I sent the way to get to the legislation. I'm not really that tech savvy. The way to get to that legislation, it has, it doesn't go into real, I mean, Michael's thing kind of broke it down into, so we can understand it, but, Michael, I mean, do we need to, do it verbatim from the legislation, or is your thing enough for us to work off of, or?
I am of the opinion that with consultants, not on potentially like the consultants that did our comprehensive plan, that with that and with some skills within the community, that there's enough known about what a community housing plan is that we, I don't think the expectation is that we're going to follow a specific formula, but we're going to make a credible case for what our needs are and how we're addressing them in a sensitive and compelling manner. And that usually is up to the author, following certain criteria such as needs assessment, implementation plan. That it's not going to be a survey that we fill out. It's actually going to be a planning document, and they tend to vary.
Also add a section in there for fair housing as well.
So
again, what's the next step? How, what's our assignment? How do we what do we do next?
Without being overly simplistic about it, I think there are a few things that we have to do concurrently. We have to think about within our community, who are the people that have skills and an understanding of the community that could effectively guide this process and be members of that board. So I think the first step is to, cast a pretty broad net and get the best people possible on the committee. And I define the best as people that have some exposure to this material.
So let me ask you this: using this group as the base, should we solicit those people, or do we put an ad out for them?
Solicit.
That's my feeling, but I wanted to hear it from somebody else.
Yeah, definitely solicit.
What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I think that there's whatever. I think solicit certainly makes sense in the sense of like seeking certain people that we know are a good fit for this. I do think that it also does make sense to advertise because, there's thousands of people on Shelter Island, and sometimes it's a surprise what people do. We are a very small group of individuals here, and it might be easy to think that we sort of like know who everyone is or something like that, but
we might not.
Right, but well, I mean, I would say I know that that's not true. I would say just based on the fact that Maria and Paul are both in this group, you're both individuals that I would have never known if it wasn't for the housing board.
Chris, I was going to say the same thing. My natural inclination is to say solicit, but then I actually recognize that I came in through an ad.
Right. I think that's a great point, and I think maybe we should put the ad out and solicit people to apply.
And I think also
Well
there's also many people that are on the island that might be of an age where they're like, mostly retired on Shelter Island, and we might know them as someone we see around town or interact with in various ways, but maybe they actually have a long history of working in something like this.
Right.
We just don't know because like, hey, they're just, chilling on Shelter Island now and they're done with that career. I do think it's important to keep in mind that, there are a few things, specific demands within this law about it, right?
Yeah.
It says that, right, so it's supposed to be at least 7 people, no more than 15. It says that there's a requirement for someone in the construction industry, the real estate industry, the banking industry. And then this is, I think, is kind of actually the most interesting one for Shelter Island. It says 3 representatives of local housing advocacy or human services organizations.
Yeah.
So, you know, basically we have one defunct housing advocacy group of which I am one of the 2 members. But, you know, on the human services front, I'd say we have a few things that would fall into that category.
Well, I would say everybody everybody here tonight, it fits into that first category.
Well, I'm not a banker, I'll tell you that.
No, you're an advocate.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say here to that one. I agree.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. I mean, I guess I was thinking about it on a more institutional front.
No, I'm thinking more of as a housing advocate.
No, and in reading it now, I think that you're right. It just says 3 representatives of local housing advocacy. It does not say of advocacy groups.
Right,
Well,
right.
it does say advocacy or human services organizations.
Right. So Curtis, here's the big question. How involved do you want to be?
Yeah, I'm as involved as you want me to be. I actually was the one of my branches was Chase when I was in banking in Shelter Island. I miss it. So any way I can help out or assist, it definitely I'm here. I asked to be a part of it because I think there's a missed opportunity, and Shelter Island is one of those regions where I think it's an afterthought, and I believe you have a wealth of opportunity there.
And again, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but we talk about affordable housing, community housing, workforce housing. I mean, it really is, we're trying to keep a community here. And it's not just workforce housing, and it's not just affordable housing. We're trying to keep, the cops and the teachers and the people that work on the ferry, and, just a nice mix of, retirees, young families, and everything in between. So I think we have to be careful what we call it, how we sell it. But, again, we're trying, my goal is to keep us as a real community, a diverse community.
Hey, Jerry, it's Julia Brennan from the Gazette.
Yes,
I have just a question. One of your agenda items tonight was introduction of members. It's not clear to me, and I do follow things pretty closely, but it's not clear to me who is actually a member of this committee who's on the call tonight. So if at some point in the meeting, you could go back to that introducing.
Yeah, I got on late, so I wasn't sure, Chris, if you did that.
No, we hadn't done that yet.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay, so I guess I just did a poor job of that. So Julia, just so you know, it is, I guess Peter is a new member, though he is a returning member, Peter McCracken. Then we have Maria Magenti is a new member. Bran Doherty is a new member, and Paul, how do you say your last name?
Cucurullo.
Cucurullo. All right.
Correct.
And I think I actually botched Brand's last name there. It's Doherty Johnson.
Doherty Johnson.
Doherty.
Doherty.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay, Doherty. Okay.
And Julia, I think you know that I've been working, hand in hand with Michael, brainstorming and trying to get some ideas. So I asked him, to come sit in on this. And Helen has expressed interest in getting involved in some way in helping the town. And I thought, based on the new legislation with her legal expertise and her knowledge of Shelter Island, this might be a good fit for her. So I asked her to sit in tonight also.
Okay, great. It would be helpful, I think, just for reporting purposes, if there was just a tiny little maybe statement from each of the members who are new, what their background is they bring to the committee. If not, I can follow up with them individually.
No, because really it would be good for us too, because Chris and I had mentioned that, and we just got started with that, it would be good if everybody can kind of introduce themselves, because this is the first time everybody's gotten together. So Maria, you want to start us off?
What I do doesn't seem at all like it would be relevant, but it really, really is. I'm a TV writer and a screenwriter and a filmmaker. But in my real life, I've been very involved in community activism and yeah, spent a lot of time as an activist. So outside of the system most of the time, regarding healthcare and housing and justice issues.
Good, thank you.
Paul?
Sure. Paul Cucurullo. From a professional background, I've been an attorney for 20 years. I've worked in institutional finance with a focus on real estate, specifically and most recently with respect to single-family rental portfolios across America, as well as commercial real estate lending. My background goes as well into securitization and structured finance, which would be residential mortgage-backed securities instead of the financing of mortgages. So when I heard somebody mentioning conforming balances before, it was the securitization of those particular instruments. So I've been in and around real estate law for the last 20 years. I became a resident of Shelter Island in the beginning of 20, and had been visiting the island for the last 5 years with my family. My son calls Shelter Island his happy place.
Aww.
So I do. And I share the sentiment. So Maria, when I hear all the different things that you've done, I think it's so much more interesting than what I've done.
Oh, stop. No.
But
I bet you've always been able to pay your mortgage. How about that? I've been living a much less reliable financial life. Let's put it that way. But
I went through 2008. No one knew what I did for a living until 2008, and then everybody knew what I did for a living. So there was a lot of lessons learned. Learned in those years.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. So I bring that and generally try to have a good attitude together with the legal background.
Thank you.
Love it. Bran.
Hi, Bran Doherty Johnson. I've been a full-time resident here since 2006. I'm a motion designer, a graphic designer and animator. And I was just interested in serving on the committee because I think affordable workforce housing, of which I am a member of the workforce, should be available for everyone where they want to live. And even though Shelter Island is a vacation destination for some, it's a full-time, local place for a lot of us. I grew up in Greenport, and I wanted to, help out in any way that I can. I'm not an expert in real estate, but I think, I'll do what I can.
Great, thank you. Hey, Michael, you want to, instead of just acting like a know-it-all, you want to tell us your
I feel like I've done this a few times, but for the benefit of those that haven't, I'll take the opportunity to say that I've been an architect. I started my own firm, which is KSS Architects in Princeton, which about 5 years ago, I went through in Princeton, Philadelphia, and New York. I went through an ownership transition, and I am now officially retired. I'm working on both ends of the housing spectrum, what I refer to as the unaffordable houses without any budgets, and the community housing that we're discussing this evening. I have been on the board for, I would venture to say, about 8 years of a community, not a community housing, but a housing board, which was in New Jersey, which was Metro West Jewish Community Housing Corporation. We had market rate houses as well as affordable housing within that portfolio. Echo Jerry's comments about, I'm obviously, as everyone is, interested in getting people into housing that is obtainable. You hear so many stories of people who are on the island that have no housing opportunities. They've lost their rental unit and there's really no place for them to go. And you hear stories about young people who are making decisions about how they want to spend their life, and they have to take off-island opportunities because of not because of lack of love for Shelter Island or even a lack of an employment opportunity, but due to a lack of housing. But I think the most important thing for me is that there is a wonderful community here of, I'll say, people who are doers, that are exciting people in a great mix. And without saying anything bad about the influx of very, very, very wealthy individuals, I think it is threatening to the diverse community that Shelter Island has always enjoyed. And, we hear terms like gated communities and, and of elite, big mansions and all the other associated things. I think Shelter Island is unfortunately heading rapidly in that direction. And I see this as an important effort to preserve community here as much as it is a housing endeavor.
I feel the same way as Michael. Add that to my thing when you're writing it.
All right. Peter, you and Chris want to just give a little update on yourself? Most of us know you, but just make it official.
I've been here full-time since 1991 and a full-time real estate agent since 1991 as well. So that's mine. But I do have one thing to say. Right now, it looks like we have very little interest in this as far as people who wanting to rent and or to purchase obtainable housing. I like that term very much. Once this gets, we get the ball rolling, and not even before we break ground, but to put it down on paper and show photos like Michael drew up. I want to move into one of them. He's done such a great job and beautiful. It's like, wow, let's get this started.
He didn't even show you the floor plans. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's great.
It doesn't matter.
Makes such
and
a
once,
difference.
once Julia from the Gazette and Julie Lane from the Reporter get this out, and just all they have to do is just show one little, picture and a diagram of it, you'll see the people. Where do I sign up?
Peter, actually, I have over 200 probably people on the list now.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
They did a big,
I
think Meg might be behind that, putting the word out, and I've gotten tons.
Yeah, Peter, that was one of the most interesting things when Sean Clark and Meg had the get together at Jimbo Thynet's house, and we did and Marie, you were there. We did a little talk around, and Bran, you even mentioned it. People, they didn't even know there was a registry. So I think, and a number of people, they said, well, we'll get the word out, and that's what we need to do, and that's what they did. So that's a good start. And Peter, I agree. If they see something concrete in the paper, then I think we'll really, and that's my feeling. I think these are two very doable projects, and if we can do them, I think then we can really, get the ball rolling.
I'm down with it. I'll do whatever.
Okay, Chris, how about you? You want to give us a little bio?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Chris Diorio. I grew up on Shelter Island. I moved away for 10 years, and after being gone, still coming back in summers and that sort of deal. But I just realized that when I left here, when I left high school, I felt like I would never, ever live here. And then I went and lived in a number of other places. And now I feel like this is the only place that I really could live. I really love this town. I really love the community here. I'm a small business owner here. I have a farm on the island, and yeah, I am seeing people that I grew up with having to leave, not because they want to, but because they can't stay here. And I feel like that problem has been around for a long time, but is becoming a bigger problem. And the scope of it is really changing the island. I think when you look at the size of the school and the numbers that we have of just, young families with kids, there are less. And I think that's whatever. It's just, to me, that is a fact, and there's no getting around that. And I think it is a bad trend that it is important to change. And yeah, just think that, like Jerry was saying before, it's not really, it's about trying to maintain the character of this island. For me, it's not about making sure that we have a workforce or something like that, but it's about having people that we, that we know and see and watch their kids grow up and watch these folks grow old and be able to stay here and do all, have all these different parts of the community that are just what make this place great.
Good, thanks. Hey, Chris, just real quick, I just want to say, I did a lot of talking tonight, and it's really not supposed to be that way. The governor's legislation was pretty much mirrored what we had put in place, that no town board members will be on the committee. I mean, we'll be liaisons and we'll be there for information, but you're the committee, it's your meeting, it's your agenda. So I did a lot of talking tonight, but I will, answer any questions as we go along. But, again, this is where I go back to, we really have to decide how we're going to set this up. We want to meet again before we, advertise to get more people. Do we interview every, we need to, get a plan how we're going to move forward.
We could also, everybody send an email to the committee, our thoughts and everything as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd be happy to write up a draft of an ad and send it to everybody for approval.
The town does that.
Oh, okay, never mind.
No, she can do the draft.
Oh, okay.
We don't need to, I mean, the town ads are pretty drab. They just, if you can do something little eye catcher, just keep it on the cheap.
Did everybody read in Newsday about a month ago about our board and everything?
No. We were
Did any, Chris, you read that? Did you see the picture that they took of the affordable house?
I read it online. I don't think I did. I don't think I saw that.
No, they had photos.
Huh.
And you didn't notice whose house they took a picture of? Mine.
Oh my God, really? Wait, is your house gorgeous? Adorable?
No, it's a Massapequa High Ranch, but it's at the opposite end of the.
You're on Bowditch Road though, so.
Oh my God.
Somebody sent it to me. I was like, good reporting, whoever, I called that reporter up, and I don't know who you did, but wrong end of the street.
Oh my God.
So whenever I'm thinking about project planning, I always think about what's the mission and who's the leader. Did I hear correctly? One mission seems to be setting up the community board pursuant to the particular regulations, and there was an ad that was come out of that. So who's the leader that we're going to be sort of standing behind and supporting to make sure that it's done?
Chris and I had this conversation. Chris is the last man standing from the original committee. Peter was on it also. Peter resigned when the shit hit the fan with our friend Bob Cohn, but he almost did it as a favor to me so that we didn't have, just so we can move on. I think the town board appoints the chairman of the committee at the recommendation of the committee, but I think we need to decide, do we want to do that before we form the committee? In other words, we have to add a minimum of 2 more people, up to 15 people. So do we want to, I guess, the chairman in now, or do we want to, I don't know. That's why I don't really.
Is that
know
based on the proposed legislation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But does that take effect before we do a referendum?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to have everything in place, Brad. Oh, yes.
All of that has to
Gotcha.
be done.
Well,
Let me take a different tact on this, and
Yeah.
that is a task.
Can I
Based-
ask Michael to stop screen sharing? It's hard to see who's talking because the
Oh,
screen.
yeah.
I'm having, okay. I think I can do that. There you go.
There we go.
There you go.
Thank you.
I was having the same struggle. And what I started to say was that in terms of the committee, we should be thinking about the task that that committee is charged with doing. And that applies to the chairman of the committee as well. How hands-on is this committee, and how consultant reliant are we going to be with regard to the principal product that I think we have to initially produce in order to be qualified for this program is the community housing plan. And I don't, I have one perspective because I've kind of rolled up my sleeves and gotten very deeply involved, but I'm kind of wondering what the criteria for committee selection is. Are we looking for people who are good editors of our consultants' work, or are we looking for a working committee or some combination of that? And as much as the ad is important, I think next step is looking for the criteria upon which we select, and that I think is around what this committee is charged with doing, and that is producing a community housing plan with the consultant. So I hope that rambling is helpful in terms of weaving into this selection criteria for committee members. And the other in addition to the consultant that we would potentially hire, or if we expand the services of the comprehensive planning consultant to include this. I know that there was a component of housing within that plan. It would seem to make sense that that's an integrated effort. But I think somebody has to think through how to staff the task and how the people that are on the committee relate to that. And for that matter, there's also, I think, last comment, and I won't say anything more, probably not, but is what resources the town has in terms of town engineer or other, when I say resources, the town, other individuals who are employed by the town who we could reach out to help with some of these tasks.
Well, I'm of the mind, having come from grassroots activism, I'm of the mind that anybody can roll up their sleeves and learn anything and do anything. It would be good, since we are mostly being here full time as residents, we're the experts of what our lives are and what the island is. So, I mean, it's not to say consultants aren't useful, but I think that the more that we have done on our own, the better off we are, and the less money we will end up spending on something like that. So again, like I'm still not clear exactly myself about how tasks might work, or how to apportion the work within the committee, research, development, pitching, plan, whatever it is. I mean, Curtis was just given the idea of or had brought up the idea of pulling together, for instance, a potential budget, a draft budget. Like any one of us, it seems to me, could figure out how that might be done. Well, I'd have to do a little bit of research, but that's the kind of thing that it seems to me anyone can volunteer to do on the committee. And there we have one thing that's done, in addition to coming up with the criteria that you mentioned for individuals that we would have to have on the formal or the state mandated advisory board.
Maria, great point. And on that point, like if the first step is assembling a community board that meets the mandate in the legislation that was passed.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that was raised was, should we be picking a head of the committee today, or should we be waiting until it's constituted? I would propose picking an interim head for the current pitch situation, so that we actually could get to the first action step, which is filling out what we think the player cards need to look like for the new board.
Yeah.
And then filling those player cards, whether that's through ad, solicitation, or both, constituting it, moving on, creating the next vote or whatever it's going to be, whatever the process is. I'm not trying to interject what it should be. Whatever the process should be to then name a leader of that particular group.
Mhm.
And then start fleshing out the project plan with respect to the actual community housing plan.
Yeah.
Right. So if we just, when you take things and everything, when it's a really big project, which this is, my mind starts to get a little fuzzy unless I break it down into smaller pieces.
Mhm.
And to me, the clear, smaller piece to start off with is forming this particular board.
Yeah.
And what I'm afraid of is that if we don't pick an interim head to do that now, that we might end up spending a lot of time spinning our wheels instead of one person is constantly bringing everybody back to center and
Yeah.
saying, all right, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. I saw this great ad that Maria wrote, and I know I need to bring it to the board to do
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z, and then we need to put it out.
Yeah. Do you want to do it, Paul?
I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to defer to the
Don't you
person
think
who is
Paul
going
would
to
be
do it.
great? Don't you think Paul would be a great interim head of the whole thing? He's already got thinking about it and got it going.
I'm just trying to propose. I'm trying to propose a project
I'm
plan
with
for whoever
you.
wants to jump on it.
Well, I support Paul.
So I think it should be the person who's been on the committee the longest. So I think Chris is.
I agree with that.
Chris.
I was actually going to suggest the same thing. The person with the most institutional knowledge.
Okay.
A different Italian. Okay.
Start by being politically correct.
So I guess whatever. The way that I had thought about this, or let me say a few things, right? So right now we are the Community Housing Board.
Right.
This new piece of legislation calls for the creation of an advisory board that will then work on creating a community housing plan. So to be very clear about what that means is that the Community Housing Board, as is right now, we are not the group that is going to make the community housing plan.
Right.
And as the legislation says, right, the town board is choosing who the advisory board is. I think as an advisory committee on housing to the current town board, it makes sense for us to develop a plan for what that advisory board should be. And I think that, so I will say is we don't actually need that to exist in order for this law to pass in the public referendum. This can be created afterwards. Now, we should definitely have it done, I think, well in advance. I think that this ties really well into the general idea of trying to kind of reconceptualize what the housing board is supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this basically is like a great opportunity to prepare for an upcoming law that will, hopefully pass, but who knows, may not. But it is, either way, it gives us the opportunity to set up like what we should be trying to do in working for promoting housing on the island. I would say that it's important, especially because we are a ways off from the vote next year on this piece of legislation. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves and be like, oh, we have to do this advisory board immediately.
Oh, okay.
I think that it is, not to say that it's not pressing, because I do think with more people that are people that would add to this discussion, there's more that we can do, and there's more that we can conceptualize as far as things we can possibly do. But I want to make sure that we're not too focused on the advisory board at the cost of not doing things that might help along with these two projects that we just discussed in this meeting. To me, those are sort of like, that to me, those two projects in my eyes are actually the most pressing thing. I suspect we'll have an advisory board long before those two projects are done. But I do think, right, so Michael and I were talking on the phone the other day, and one of the things we were talking about was credits with water, the transfer of development rights, and looking into parcels that the town owns that were not bought with CPF, or were not bought together with the county, and thinking about if the town actually owns property that we maybe already have certain water rights associated with. There's things like that. I think kind of coming up with what we were talking about, like the potential budget of costs that might incur relating to a rental project, thinking about, cost of management and how that's going to be run and those types of things. Like anything we can do to keep the ball rolling on those have largely been a Jerry and Michael project. But I think that that's like something that we as the current community housing board should be able to help in that. And I don't really know what the best way to do that is. And maybe Michael or Jerry, you have some suggestions on that. But I just want to make sure we aren't like getting too far ahead of ourselves just on thinking this advisory board needs to happen immediately. I don't
Chris, the one thing I just want to say, a little bit of a wrench in here is, and I mentioned it to Fred Thiel, and we're going to have some further discussion, is if we follow the game plan, the referendum will be a year from next week, and it won't go into effect till the following January.
Mm-hmm.
If it passes.
We could have our own referendum anytime we want. So if we get things in place and we feel comfortable, we can do a referendum, whatever, Helen, you probably know the legalese when, 30 days advertising or whatever it is,
Right.
and not miss another whole year of money from the fund. Fred's concern is, but sometimes when you do a special election, you don't get the people you want voting. Everybody's not here to vote. You might just get the ones that don't want it. So it's a discussion we need to have, not tonight, not tomorrow, but something we have to think about. Do we want to wait the whole year like everybody else, or do we want to see if we can get it in place and maybe get half a year's worth of revenue from this tax just to get started? Or is it worth it? Maybe it's not worth it,
Mm-hmm.
So there's
At this
a lot of
particular
pieces
juncture,
to the puzzle.
we have all of the time. I mean, when I say we have all of the time, we have approximately a year, assuming that we, just for a moment, assuming that we go for the referendum that is concurrent
Right.
with
Yep.
when people are here, and it's a other type of election where we get the largest numbers, which in my mind may translate to the greatest opportunity for success.
Yes,
For
and
success.
next year's a governor's election, and traditionally Shelter Island has had the biggest support for the transfer tax bills.
So with that construct in mind, what would make sense is if we divide up this resource, which is time, and reach out to our consultants and say, what is a reasonable period of time to develop a housing plan? And I would, not throwing out numbers, but I would venture to say, people are going to tell us 6, 7, 8 months is a time frame for that. And we also have the issue of coordinating with our comprehensive plan. So that's a bigger planning effort.
Right.
My point is that while it seems like we've got a lot of time, there are some things that are going to fill that time and make it crunchy.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that we go out immediately and form the committee. I'm just suggesting that we put pencil to paper and put some time periods to these tasks and divide the time up that we have as a resource most effectively. I would also passionately argue for taking appropriate amount of time to pick the best committee that we can. And
Right.
I would still speak strongly in terms of the passion and the knowledge of Shelter Island, plus getting people into that committee that they're not the entire committee is not a group of people who are doing this for the first time. That there's, you tend to be more efficient as you've done and been exposed. So I would like to see the committee populated with a variety of people, some of which have, great experience with banking and financing and pro formas, so that we cover all the bases and we can move through this efficiently without errors. That's not to say that people that will want to be quick studies and are enthusiastic about Shelter Island wouldn't find a place on the committee, but we should also place value on experience and take a reasonable amount of time to go through that selection process and make, obviously make it as thoughtful of a process as we can. Coming back, somebody should sit down and say, how much time do we need for each of these activities? What's the best way to divide this resource up? Do we have a month and a half to select a committee? And in the interim time, we continue to progress certain things that we know we need. And then to your other point, Chris, about pulling off a project, I would venture to say that some projects that the Man Waring project may be a good candidate for that. I worry about the Highway Barn site for a number of reasons, because it's a rental. It may be part of a package that we want to put out to a developer. If we cluster different sites to get a big enough project to attract the grant interest, the governor's interest in this, and the private community's interest in this, that project may not be the best project to fast track. So I think those are decisions that we have to drill down on deeper, and I recognize the need to get something going, because we've been talking about this for an extended period of time, and it may impact the needs analysis. If people don't believe in the island's ability to get this done, we may not get accurate information back as to their people have interest in being a part of this and taking one of these units, because they think it might not happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is all a very reasonable point. I am not saying that we need to go gung-ho on the rental thing. I think the Man Waring one does seem like a kind of a lowest hanging fruit deal that seems pretty feasible, and that we're not that far off from really getting the ball rolling on. But I've been on this committee for like 4 years or something like that. I've been on this committee long enough that I don't remember how long I've been on it, but I do know we haven't done anything yet. And I feel like we are much, the ball is rolling in a real way that it never was when I first started. I would be, right. So like thinking about something like just, whatever, of potentially trying to have this rental deal rolled into like a larger package of other thing that we're doing. I think it's important that we're taking the formal steps now of just like thinking about like, is that something we really want to even do? What other things are potentially on the table that could be going along with that? If that stuff doesn't add up enough to be something that seems like something really great and more doable because of how great it is, do we actually just try to move forward with that more immediately?
And can I just make a quick comment?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to get off in a few. I actually have my daughter's calling from college, and I hear in the background. I only have a window of comment to speak with her. But what from my own experience, I know one thing: to get a community to get behind you, they need to see something visual. I think that the for sale units are a go, because there are feasible means by which you can do now. You don't have to wait on a specific investor or funding source. You can easily figure out what the total cost would be even if you decide you want to modular the whole entire project and do it by modular home, and put and have this done at a smaller cost. It could easily be phased in and be funded and financed through conventional means. And then you have something done, something erected, something that you could say, well, this committee has accomplished this. Now we're looking at a bigger plan. I think if you try to roll both of them out at the same time, visually, people just won't be able to wrap their heads around it because it looks too big.
Makes sense to me.
Hey,
Okay,
Jerry, I had one other, It's been a
Yeah.
long time since I ever had to put a public referendum up, back on my days on the school board, but I think there's a 90-day notice to the Board of Elections for a public referendum. And that pushes your schedule back to the middle of next summer.
Yeah, I mean, I was just
When
tossing
you
it
have to
out
get
there
it.
as a possibility. I don't think it's a reality, Julia.
Okay.
I just, again, if Cuomo had
Just short
passed this,
calendar.
when the Assembly and the Senate passed it, if Cuomo had passed it, it would have been $30 million nest egg for the East End that
Yes.
we completely missed. So,
In the interest of time and completing one important task, can we complete the task related to the interim chair? I was left uncertain as to who that individual was. Is it Chris? Is that correct? Or
We nominated Chris, but it's up to the board, right, Jerry? The town board to,
well, as long as if you make the recommendation I'll bring that to the board. Sure. If you guys all agree that you want Chris, then I'll tell the board that's what you want.
I'd
Sure,
second.
make it.
So do we have to, I probably can't be the one,
I don't
maybe.
think you need a formal vote. I could tell them that,
Yeah.
the board picked you, Chris.
Okay, well, thank
Curtis,
you.
I don't want to hold you up. I don't want you to miss your daughter.
Yeah.
Hey,
I've
Curtis,
actually
yeah,
got to run too, so.
Yeah, then thank you very much, Curtis.
Yes,
I'm
thank you,
here.
Curtis.
So real
I'm going to
quick, and
email-
again, I'm overstepping my bounds here. I'm gonna send out an email. Chris, I'll send it to you, that what I've been tossing around for criteria. Why don't we just start with something? And my thoughts on, I'm thinking of a lottery system of how it would work. So I'm just gonna give you my ideas, and maybe that could be our next discussion is, because in the meantime, I'm setting up a meeting with Steve Ballone to talk, I want to go right to the top of the county to talk about the man-wearing parcel and how we're going to do it. And I want to get a fast track with the county. But while Michael and I are doing that, I think if we can start putting together the criteria piece to the puzzle and the potential, lottery, how we're going to pick them. So I'll give you my thoughts, and then maybe we can brainstorm that at the next meeting. Plus whatever else you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, I think it would be really great for all of us to think about who would be good fits to this advisory board. And, there's the criteria of who's supposed to be represented in that, but it's a pretty small portion of who could be in it.
No, I'm sorry, Chris, I'm talking about criteria who's eligible for the housing.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So
Are we able to get, so Michael, I think you created that fantastic summary. I read through the legislation myself, but is that summary something that you can make available?
I'd be very happy to make it available to the group. What should I just email everybody, or should it be posted somewhere? However.
I would send it to Jane and let Jane get it out to everybody.
Okay.
yeah, I think email is probably the most appropriate step right now, as we're not trying to, do anything more formal than talk about it at this point. But so I think, Jerry, outside of the criteria for who could be potentially getting housing, I think it's also really important for us to talk about the criteria of who we think should maybe be on this advisory board.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I think that's, as far as like a major role for the housing board at this current moment, I think that's something that all of the members should be thinking about now. And I think the biggest thing is to think about like what roles outside of the listed requirements of representatives, who else is a good fit, what other type of work is a good fit.
Yeah. Chris, I was just a little confused because, that's where I was going initially, that I wanted to go forward to follow the governor's legislation. But then, it was brought up that, we have plenty of time to do that. And I don't want to lose any time with what we're doing going forward with our projects.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure we're not stopping one at the expense of the other. So that's why I'm saying if we can start, we don't have to have it, ready, but let's start thinking about, a lottery and what the criteria would be to be eligible for the housing. And let's get everybody, again, I have ideas, but let's get everybody's ideas and, you know,
I think maybe
while we're doing the other stuff, Chris, not, you know.
Absolutely. I think both of those things, criteria for advisory board and criteria for who would be getting the housing, let's say specifically on the main warring property right now. Those seem like the two things we should be thinking about. If you send us your criteria, Jerry, that would be really great. I'll touch base with Curtis and see what Southampton has. And then I'm also happy to reach out to a couple of the other East End town folks about that, as I have met a few of them before. And I guess I also do want to just add, just so everyone else here knows, something else that Curtis has been involved in is an organization called Ascend Home and Community, or Homes and Community. And it is basically a development corporation, I believe. I'm not sure if it's a nonprofit or not. But it's the way that he works in towns that are not Southampton. And he, basically works with some money folks to help develop properties in other towns for affordable housing. So he has experience both in the public sector as an employee of the town of Southampton, but then he also does this privately. Basically all of the other towns have people in various capacities that have more experience doing these things, because they have things. So yeah, I think if you send us your criteria that you've been thinking of, we'll touch base with some of those other folks, and then we can all kind of think about what an advisory board should look like. Does anyone else have anything that seems like it should be on the table right now?
I just want to be clear, and that is that the advisory board, because one of the things on the agenda was whether or not this committee was going to continue to exist. So are we taking a vote or something? Are we going to exist?
I think we're going to meld in. I mean, my feeling is we're going to meld into the advisory board.
Okay.
You're going to meld into the advisory.
So I also, just so you know, Maria, with something like that, that is a town board decision that we can make a suggestion on. And I think it's maybe worthwhile thinking about if there's a reason for there to be the housing board as is separate from the advisory board. I personally don't think that there is. But I would recommend, if you haven't looked at the community housing law that is on the books right now, that you take a look at that. Because there are some things that are important. There's important things in that law that don't exactly tie into this new piece of legislation. And the other thing is that the law that we have on the books now is what we're going to be working off of, whether it's changed or stays the same. If this referendum might not pass. We might not get this 0.5% tax. And we have a law that is what we would be currently working with unless it's changed.
I see.
Regardless of this 0.5% housing fund.
Got it. Okay.
So Chris, it's the 28th of October when you want to meet next.
Well, so usually it's the last Thursday of the month, but that November is always a funny one. That's Thanksgiving. And I can't remember if traditionally it's.
We have it scheduled for the 18th.
Yeah, good. I think if that's good for everyone, I think that makes sense.
From my perspective, I already know I have a conflict on the 18th. Do we have to schedule it now, or can we do it by email to find a mutually agreeable time?
I would be happy to do it by email. We don't. I don't know, procedurally that's fine to do. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good to me. I think that so the one thing, Paul, I don't know if it's just that night that you have a conflict or if it's like that week or something, but it would be great to try to do it the week before Thanksgiving as opposed to trying to cram it around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's actually just that night. I was trying to pull up my calendar as we're talking. I do have availability that week. So I'd love to.
I have a conflict on the 18th as well.
Yeah, so Why don't we touch base on email? I think personally, unless there's a conflict for everyone or whoever, I think maybe shooting for a different day that week seems like the best.
Yeah, we can make it happen.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Is there anything that we're supposed to be doing? I mean, aside from me wanting to do a little draft of what the ad could say, even though it sounds like I don't really need to do that.
So Jerry's going to send us some of his sort of proposed criteria for recipients of housing, or those that are eligible, to figure out the lottery system. So I think we should all review that and just kind of take notes on that, maybe look at examples of how other towns do it. You can look, all the East End towns have laws on the book that describe how it works.
Chris, that might be a good idea if we can, I know you've done it, if we can set up maybe some, a visit over to East Hampton to see, their program or, some of the things like that. That might be, a good thing.
Yeah, let me talk to a couple of those folks, and we'll see about doing that. I think that would be great.
Yeah, down with that.
We've done it in the past, but I don't know if you were ever, Peter, did you ever go to any of those meetings?
No.
Yeah. So I think I'm happy to reach out to some of these folks and try to make that happen. It might be hard for all of us to get there. If we all can, that's great. But even if a couple or a few of us get to meet with each of the different representatives. And
the important thing with something like that is, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. These people are all doing it already.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's pick their brains.
Totally. I think and the biggest thing is they've all been very happy to share their information with us and try to give us guidance. And so, I think that's whatever. Let's take that help and roll with it.
Okay.
Great.
Right, so Chris, before you end, you have to ask Julia and Julie if they have any questions.
Okay. Julia and Julie, do you have any questions?
I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have like 20,000 questions. I have to get answers for, right?
We'll call Chris.
I'm happy to chat anytime, and we will obviously post when the next meeting is, and y'all are of course more than welcome to come.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it.
And
thanks, everybody.
Yeah, so I guess
this was good.
I think we need a motion.
Yeah. Second.
All right.
Second.
Great.
All right. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Take
Jerry.
care,
Bye.
everyone.
Have a good
Okay.
night.
Talk soon.